Hey, welcome to This Is Not a Podcast. It's not exactly a live stream. This is just my thoughts with Rob Markman. I think that's the name of the show. We're going to stick with that. I'm going to be honest. I wasn't planning to do this many episodes with this frequency, but the way y'all supporting, the way y'all watch, and then the conversations we have in the comments is just inspiring, right? They say never read the comments section, and we just been having good conversations. So, I appreciate that. It's motivating. So thank y'all. And I promise, y'all seen the headlines, y'all seen the thumbnail. I don't want to make every video about Drake or Kendrick, or actually this Friday, I want to do a video on Nas Illmatic, the 30th anniversary. Next week, I want to explore Outkast's first album, Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music. So y'all can look forward to that. Rest in peace to Rico Wade. But I want to get into this. In my last video, we talked about Rick Ross Champagne Moments. That was the diss track to Drake. And we briefly talked about ghostwriting, right? Because of the Ross line. Here's the line. Crack smoke is the exhaust from my pen and pad. Ghostwriters, they get to floss what you could have had. So I broke that down a bit and reminded folks of the Quinton Miller writing for Drake on If You're Reading This Is Too Late project. A lot of y'all had something to say in the comments. And like I said, I appreciate all the comments. I'm going to read some of them within this episode for sure and address it later. But so we talk about Drake having writers on his record. And, what I said for many hip hop heads, right, including me, there'll always be that question in our minds. I believe and I want to believe and I do believe that Drake wrote Push Ups. I want to believe he writes records like 8 a.m. in Charlotte, 4 p.m. in Calabasas, like the real rap records. I believe he writes those. I want to believe he writes those. I hope he writes those. But, it's always going to be a question. So as soon as Ross brings it up, and I knew it was going to come up in this battle. I didn't bring it up in any of my commentary until Ross brought it up, but I knew it was going to come up. But Ross brings up on Champagne Moments about ghostwriting, and then miraculously, a reference track by Lil Yachty for Jumbotron Sh Poppin appears. That was from the Her Lost album, and it was leaked. To me, it wasn't leaked. It wasn't coincidental. Somebody was holding on to that for the right time and let it go. So, y'all been asking for some audio in this podcast too. You was like, yo, instead of reading the lyrics, can you play audio? I'm hesitant because I'm like, I don't want to get flagged. I don't want them to start like demonetizing. I'm just starting, so I'm learning this YouTube thing. I want to make sure that everything in these videos are mine. But we're going to try. I'm going to play some of this audio. I'm going to play it through the mic. This is the Lil Yachty version of Jumbotron Sh Poppin. If the audio's not good, I'll fix it in the edit and I'll just pipe the audio in. But check it out.
I just pulled me off the phone, trying to take stands. Round around my effing in like the whole hands. I said so much last time, it's hard to leave a bed. Then I did the whole kind of tech in a cold red. If I tell this bitch to pull up, she gon' moped it. My doggy don't smoke on shit unless it's unleaded. I don't back and forth over no net, so just gon' dead it. See me when you see me, and if it's smoke, doggy, unleash it. Dick rockin' bitch, this my fave, I'ma gon' beat it. Looking in the mirror, kiss my face, I'm too conceited. Send that bitch home, call another dog, I'm too slime. Shawty gave me up on the first day, that's her round.
So that was the Yachty version. It starts off with the hook and then we start getting into the verses. And, as soon as I heard it, I compared it with the Drake version that we heard. And Drake does change some words, but the basic rhyme constructions, all of the endings, like the rhyme is basically there. I think Drake takes a little bit of it and make it his own, but it's essentially what Yachty laid down. So, I compared it. I read the lyrics on Genius. I listened. I went back and forth. I'm like, man, this is really the same version of the record. Obviously, Drake's voice and tone is different, but the flow and then the lyrics are the same. Now, I never said this publicly, but last year, somebody played me in person. It wasn't like an internet thing or I found it on the internet or somebody emailed it to me. But last year, somebody played me a Lil Yachty version of Back Outside Boys. So I had heard that too. And then, if you check the credits on Spotify on both of these songs, Yachty's listed as a producer and as a songwriter. And I want to shout out Fred Williams 3089 because on the Ross video we did last, he left a comment and he said, the album/song credits should tell you who did what for the album/song. Can Google that info as well. And although he's right, sometimes it doesn't always work out. Like Google, I don't always trust. I like to check the credits and DSPs, particularly Spotify. Sometimes Wikipedia could be wrong. Y'all know I work for Genius, but sometimes Genius can be wrong too. It's all user-based. Like users can upload to Wikipedia, right? Users can upload to Genius. So I always like to check the Spotify credits because those come from the label or the artist themselves. And even a lot of times those have mistakes and need to be corrected. But for me, it's a little more trustworthy. But in this case, it's right. Yachty now isn't a ghostwriter per se, right? Because ghostwriters receive no writing credit, right? They're often paid for their services, and then they disappear. They're a ghost. Nobody knows who they are. They don't participate in the back end or the publishing. Their name doesn't appear on the record. The curious thing here, though, is that Yachty appears as a producer and a writer. So the way it works is if you produce on a record, right, you automatically receive writing credit as well because you wrote the musical portion of the record. Now, you know, nobody really writes music notes down or like sheet music, right? But it's that concept. It's a beat can be written. A beat is comprised of different musical notes. So if you're a producer on the record, you wrote those musical notes. You also receive writing credit for the entire record. But the reverse isn't true. If you wrote lyrics, you'll receive writing credit as well, but you won't receive a producer credit. So on this record, Yachty received, and Back Outside Boys also, Jumbotron Sh Poppin and Back Outside Boys, Yachty received production credit and writing credit. Maybe he did something to the beat or helped facilitate like the beat getting to Drake, or, you know, he could have did a beat change or suggested a beat change. There's a lot of different ways to earn producer credits. So Yachty's credited as both. So that brings me to my next point, and I want to shout out Davin Bahadur. I know I messed up your name. I'm so sorry. Davin Bahadur 6804. All right. So he left a comment, or they left a comment, and they challenged me a bit. I'm cool with that. Like in this comment section, I'm cool if you don't agree with me. Like we don't have to agree at all. So they challenged me. They said, Rob, can we stop saying ghostwriter? Homie was credited. It's talking about Quinton Miller when I started talking about Quinton Miller in the Ross video. I don't know if I probably used the term ghostwriter because Ross used it, but I think I also used the term writer because, again, he was credited. So you're right. Rob, can we stop saying ghostwriter? Homie was credited. He was a writer. Hova even got hooks from Kanye, i.e. Lucifer. You also release records. I do release records, man. Shout out for recognizing that. You know all about reference tracks. I never got a reference track. I do release records. I never got a reference track. But yes, I know all about reference tracks. And he goes on to say, I know the general public doesn't know about how records get made, but you're doing a disservice by continuing this narrative. So yeah, I want to talk about that. Again, when we talk in these comments, we don't always have to agree. I actually love this. Like, I'm being challenged right here. And this was part of the inspiration for making the video. But, you know, they say, you know, in reference to Quinton Miller, who wrote on 10 Bands, Know Yourself, and Legend, Quinton was credited, right? There were hard copies of the album, if you're reading this. If y'all remember, that actually came out digitally first. And I don't know if Spotify had the credits right away, right? Like the DSPs weren't as advanced back then as they were now. They didn't have all the metadata. But it came out digitally first. And there were hard copies of, if you're reading this, that came out maybe a few weeks after, maybe a week after, and with credits on the inside. And Quinton's name was in there for sure. And then we heard the reference tracks, right? And you know, you got the thing about reference tracks too is, and I'll talk about this a little later, but you don't hear too many. I haven't, up until Quinton Miller, I hadn't heard maybe more than 4 or 5 reference tracks in my just life as a fan. You know, there's a Biggie one that he did for Lil Kim. That's amazing. I love it. But you don't hear too many of them. So it was jarring to hear. It was like, oh, wow, we've always heard about them, but we've never actually heard them, right? So, but yeah, absolutely, Quinton Miller was a writer. He was not a ghostwriter. He was credited. Now, comparing Jay-Z getting a beat and a hook from Kanye, the Lucifer example, right? That's different than me, right? And you may feel different, but this is how I feel. I feel that rappers should write their own verses. You know, hooks I'm okay with. But those verses, like rappers should pen their own verses, right? So take a singer like Beyonce, take even Michael Jackson, who can sing songs that other people wrote. The talent is in the voice. Like you could write a song lyric and get somebody to sing that song. You get 10 people to sing that song, and none of them are going to sing it like Beyonce can. The talent is in the way Beyonce sings. The talent is in the way Michael Jackson delivers those vocals, right? For a rapper, I kind of feel like, and rapping's not easy either, right? Flow, breath control. But for rappers, I think the power is in the pen. So I always expect, the rappers to deliver the verses. Plus, the verses is really where your life experience happens, where the detail happens, where the real. So I'm okay with a hook, but you gotta write those verses. That's just me. But yeah, and Beyonce writes too. Michael Jackson writes as well, but they also use writers famously, right? I'm not making this up. I just hold rappers to a different standard. It takes skill, but for me, if you're a rapper, it starts with the writing, it starts with the lyricism. Again, you may feel different. That's just how I feel. Okay, so we're talking about Drake, right? And let's be fair. We're talking about Drake. We're talking about this Yachty reference that leaked. And I'm gonna wrap up how this all relates to Kendrick Lamar towards the end. But let's be fair. Drake is not the first hip hop artist. He's not the only rapper who uses writers. The first hip hop hit ever, Rapper's Delight, wasn't written by the Sugar Hill Gang, Big Bang Hank and those guys. It was written by Grandmaster Caz. Those were Grandmaster Caz's rhymes. Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, The Message. This is an important record in hip hop, seminal record. Most of it was written by the late Duke Booty, though most of the record was performed by Melly Mel, right? And Melly Mel is considered one of the greatest MCs ever. Mel wrote his verse, the last verse that Mel has on that record. A child is born with no state of mind, blind to the ways of mankind. That was Melly's verse from another record. So Mel wrote that verse, but a lot of the other raps, or all the rest of the raps that Mel is spitting on there, Duke Booty wrote, right? So, let's be clear, let's be fair. Dr. Dre had writers. Diddy famously had writers. He said, don't matter if I write rhymes or write checks. Maybe Diddy's a bad example in this climate. Snoop had writers for some songs. Snoop has admitted this. Now, Snoop also writes on his own too. Snoop gave us one of the greatest hip hop albums ever in Doggy Style, but Snoop had admitted to having some writers. I remember seeing him talk about Still DRE and his parts on Still DRE. Jay-Z wrote the whole record. There were other records. I think on The Dogfather, Snoop talked about having writers. He was going through his trial. Snoop has famously admitted to having writers, but this is also the guy who wrote and gave us Doggy Style, and countless other classics, right? If you look up on YouTube, y'all can go search this. There's an amazing Biggie reference that he made for Lil' Kim, a song called Queen Bitch. I talked about it earlier. It's one of my favorite reference tracks. It's dope. It's essentially another Biggie record, but it's so funny to hear Big because he's rapping as if he's Kim, so Kim can then take the record, learn it, and record it herself. So it's funny to hear Big refer to himself as a bitch. I think he's talking about playing with his coochie, all types of stuff like that. But that's a dope reference. But so reference tracks, writers, this is going on since the beginning of hip hop. So let's be fair, all right? I also want to shout out JJ Vasquez 2424. He has an opinion. He says, as a hip hop head, any rapper that had ghostwriters must never get the benefit of the doubt. We must always assume there were ghostwriters. This is hip hop. Let's keep it that. And I feel you, that's a reaction to me saying, I was giving Drake the benefit of the doubt. I know he used writers, but I believe and I want to believe he's writing push-ups. But you don't know. You really, part of that is true. There's always going to be a doubt in your mind. There's always going to be an asterisk. I wasn't in the studio with him. I didn't see the process. I can't say for sure, right? I want to believe it. The hip hop fan in me wants to believe it. And if there was a reference track that came out with push-ups, or if we find out somebody else wrote that, it would be devastating. It would be heartbreaking. Again, I think Drake is writing those records. I do want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I don't know. There's an asterisk there, right? Mindful Testimony says, I believe Drake writes 90% of his music. And then Ebony Graham 8108 says, I appreciate you addressing the Ghostwriter issue regarding Drake, because to me, the whole war hinges on this, i.e., we don't trust you. This is a case of a clash of values between hip hop and rap because they aren't the same. And I like Drake. Love Kendrick though. And Ebony makes a good point about the values in hip hop. Basically, writers have always existed for rappers, credited, uncredited, always existed. I came up in the era, like I said, where you wrote your own raps if you wanted to be the top rapper. And, you know, if you like, even if Puff or Dre didn't write, like, we still love your music. But we didn't put you in those top MC conversations that we had at the barbershops or the lunch tables, or now that we have on the internet, right? Like forums when we were coming up, or on Twitter, or now in these videos. So I get what Ebony is saying. She's talking about the essence of hip hop and more so rap, the commercialism of it and the clash. And I know this is big for a lot of people. And really, too, I think Drake and Kendrick kind of represent those two different sides, right? Like Drake is hip hop, not taking Drake out of hip hop, but he is pop successful. And Kendrick is pop successful too. Millions of records, worldwide tours, but Kendrick is hip hop, right? And so I think that's why people are so interested in this battle too, because these guys seem like they represent polar opposite things. So we'll see. But, look, the fact is the time has changed. And I don't know if this generation of fans hold artists to that same standard that Ebony is talking about, that same standard that I'm talking about, that I came up on. A lot of this battle is going to be dictated not just by me, like I'm in the media, or I'm on YouTube, but like the fans. Like, we hear from the public right away. We hear from y'all right away. We hear on social media right away. Like, the public does dictate this narrative, and it'll be interesting how this plays out. And so y'all heard me in my other videos just talk about the different angles that people take in a battle, right? Like we said that Cole took the wrong angle going at Kendrick's discography, just wasn't a smart angle. Drake took some pretty dope angles on push-ups. Kendrick took some pretty dope angles on Like That. I still think we're getting started, but you're finding your angle, you're finding your end, you're finding that truth that you're going to take and use it to twist public perception and twist the knife into your opponent. So it's going to be interesting to see what Kendrick's angle is, because he's absolutely going to respond. And it's going to be interesting to see if he uses any of this writer divide in his diss. Back to what Ebony was talking about, like that true hip hop artistry versus maybe commercialism, right? She posed it as hip hop versus rap. So I'm reading into her like true artistic vision versus commercialism. Like, I think that's what she's saying. And if she's not saying that, Ebony, I'm sorry for reading your words the wrong way. And, Kendrick kind of gets into that on Like That when he says, and your best work is a light pack, Prince outlived Mike Jack. Now, the culture often pits Prince and Michael Jackson against each other. Prince was always seen as the more artistic one, Michael Jackson the more popular one, right? But both greats, both like GOATs, greatest ever, right? But one thing about Prince is that he wrote all of his own music. Like, you could put Prince in the studio by himself and Prince will come out with a song. He wrote lyrics, the music, the beat, top to bottom, right? Prince can do that. Michael Jackson wrote too, but Michael Jackson, who ultimately had more pop success than Prince and more pop appeal, had guys like Rod Temperton, who wrote I Wanna Rock With You, who wrote the Thriller song, who wrote Lady in My Life. And I don't know, this is a reading into Kendrick's lyrics, but it's definitely Kendrick positioning himself as Prince and Drake as Michael Jackson. And we know that Drake is chasing the Michael Jackson, the Billboard Hot 100. It's been a lot of references to Drake and Michael Jackson, right? Drake is making these references and these comparisons. So Kendrick is saying, no, I'm the more artistic one. And if you read deeply into it, or more deeper into it, possibly Kendrick saying, no, I write my own shit and you don't. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? But it'd be interesting. And so a potential breakdown of that lyric could allude to writing as well. And then remember, on King Kuna, Kendrick spit, I could dig rapping, but a rapper with a ghostwriter, what the fuck happened? I swore I wouldn't tell, but most of y'all sharing bars like you got the bottom bunk in the 2-man cell. Now, I swore I wouldn't tell. So that's Kendrick saying he knows something that we didn't know. I swore I wouldn't tell. He knew something. He had some information that we didn't have. And King Kunta came out a few months before the Drake Quinton Miller controversy when Meek revealed it on Twitter. I don't know if that's what Kendrick meant. I don't know back when he dropped King Kunta if he was referring to Drake. But it'll be interesting if Kendrick takes this angle in his response, because judging from the lyrics of King Kunta, a rapper with a ghostwriter, what the fuck happened? The hip hop fan, the competitor, the artist in Kendrick is disappointed. Maybe I'm going to say disgusted at having a ghostwriter, or maybe having writers at all. So it'll be interesting to see if Kendrick even takes a bit of this angle in his response. We'll wait and see. But those are just my thoughts. As always, they're subjective. I try to keep it balanced, but let me know what you think, man. Like, subscribe, get in them comments. Let's talk. I talk back with you, and basically off of the conversation we have in the comments could very well end up being in the next video, man. So thank y'all for y'all support, man. Till the next time. Peace.